In this video, we will talk about orthographic learning. What is orthographic learning? It is learning orthographic forms. So it is a necessary step in going from sounding out words to reading by sight. So from going from phonological recoding to orthographic decoding, in other words, or from assembling phonology to addressing phonology. Orthographic learning is absolutely necessary for orthographic decoding because orthographic decoding presupposes the existence of familiar sequences of letters. So that is the orthographic forms of words. But how are these words learned? How do the connections from orthographic forms become mapped onto the phonological forms? What activates these phonological forms of words? Orthographic learning involves committing words to memory in two parts. The first is actually learning the sequences of letters, and the second is connecting these sequences to the corresponding phonological forms. So just looking at words, even many times, is not enough for learning to read words by sight. One also must learn the connections. And how this can happen has engaged the research community for quite some time. And then once you have stored these forms and their connections, orthographic learning allows you to access and retrieve these stored forms increasingly rapidly. So faster and faster as your skill grows. In order to be able to learn the orthographic forms of words and their mappings, you need to be able to perform phonological recoding. Indeed, reading researchers are convinced that phonological recoding is the way one builds up the orthographic knowledge. So in other words, flashcards do not work with pre-readers. You cannot teach someone to read by showing them what's called flashcards. If you've never heard of flashcards, please consider yourself lucky and do not look them up. If you receive an advertisement for any reading or intervention program that involves flashcards, just throw it away without reading further. Now, the dominant idea in orthographic learning is what is called the self-teaching hypothesis. And the self-teaching idea is trying to answer the question of how you can map orthographic forms to their pronunciation if no one is there to tell you how the words are supposed to be pronounced. So imagine you are a beginner reader. You have mastered the alphabetic principle and you can recode phonologically, and you see this letter sequence for the first time. It's unknown to you. Although, of course, you speak the language, you've never seen these four letters there before. And even if you had, you're a bit of a beginner, so you wouldn't be able to make very much of it. But you can recognize the four letters because you know your letters and their sounds. So this means that you can map this letter to and this letter to and so on. And then you can blend. So you can say milk. Oh, milk. Okay, I know this word. You recognize the word you just said because you said it to yourself, you heard it. It's a word you know and brings this to mind. At this point, what is happening is that you are looking at this letter sequence. You are hearing yourself say this, and you're thinking of this. So you have an orthographic, a phonological, and a semantic representation active in your mind simultaneously. So you connect them. You associate the letter sequence with this phonological and semantic information that you already had from your spoken language. And every time you do this, these three things get connected more and more strongly. So this means that you're actually learning a connection from a letter sequence to a phonological form. And that's the idea of self-teaching. That's why it's called self-teaching, because no one is telling you how this new visual stimulus is pronounced. Nobody's telling you how this letter sequence is pronounced. You figure it out by assembly phonology. And then by retrieving the known word, you connect it to the orthographic form that you're looking at. So you're teaching yourself the mapping from a letter sequence to a phonological word form. And thus you learn this representation and this connection. Orthographic learning is a learning process, which means it takes a while. It requires multiple encounters with each word to be learned, because the result is knowing individual familiar words. So as you read common words again and again, then these words become increasingly familiar. So it's faster and easier for you to recognize them when you see them and to decode them without having to go through the letter by letter, grapheme by grapheme, step by step process. And then in time, pronunciation and meaning are accessible so fast and so effortless and without intervening steps that this becomes direct. It no longer needs to be mediated by going through the step-by-step process of assembly. And so the mapping from the orthographic form to the phonological form becomes automatic. Obviously, common words are learned first because they're common, which means you see them more often. So you've seen common words more times before you've seen uncommon words many times. And this leads to common words recognized faster. One of the largest effects in word reading is the effect of frequency. Literally, common words are recognized and read measurably faster than less common words. And of course, much faster than pseudo words, which are completely unfamiliar. There is no binary distinction between familiar and unfamiliar words. This is a continuum, a gradation from completely unknown to very, very familiar. And reading experience brings continuous improvement. Even if you have some words stored in your mind and being familiar, reading them again and again makes them even more familiar. So skilled readers end up knowing more words by sight, so having stored orthographic forms and their connection in their minds for more words in a way that they are faster to recognize and faster to pronounce if they need to be pronounced, faster to access their meanings. And because of the added experience of skilled readers, they're also faster in recognizing all kinds of words because they have practiced decoding more, so they can decode faster even when words are unfamiliar. So orthographic learning results in increasingly efficient reading by sight and also increasingly efficient reading of unfamiliar strings.